Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are going to cover the tari form of verbs. And here you might be wondering what the tari form exactly is, grammatically speaking. How do we conjugate a verb into the tari form? Well, the tari form of a verb is basically just the ta form of the verb with the character ri right after it. So for the tari form of verbs, there are actually three different meanings that can apply to the grammar construct itself. And for the most common definition of the tari form, what we do is we use the tari form of verb 1 and verb 2 and possibly 3, 4, 5 verbs or however many you want, but the minimum is basically 2, and this means to do verb 1 and to do verb 2 among other such things. So again, with more emphasis on the grammar this time, what verb 1 in tari form plus verb 2 in tari form plus the regular verb suru means is that a particular subject does verb 1, verb 2, and other such things in an indicated duration of time or whatever. So in English, this might mean something along the lines of yesterday I cleaned my room, I ate dinner, I played video games, I read books, and other such things, or etc., or something along those lines. The second definition that the tari form can apply to is that when we have a subject that is a plural entity such as those people or those kids or those guys, and we use the tari form, what this can mean is basically that among that group of people, some of them are doing a particular activity, verb 1, and others are doing another particular activity, verb 2. It's not going to mean that the same subject is doing multiple activities. It means that different subjects within this group are doing different activities. So in English, this might be something along the lines of, I went to the library yesterday and there some students were studying and some were using the computers and others were checking out books or something like that. Here we see that the collective subject here is basically students, but in that particular group of subjects, there are different entities doing different things. Finally, for the third definition of tari, this is a much less common definition that is used, but basically this expresses that within a particular entity, there is a repetitive change of state. And this definition will have a lot less to do with the actions of people, but actual entities like, say, the rain, it's raining on and off, then that would express a repetitive state of change, so we would use tari for that. But again, this is the much less commonly used definition of the tari form. Okay, so with the three basic meanings of the tari form said and done now, let's go into some examples for each one to get a better idea of how each one works distinctively. So for the examples, we'll go in the same order as the order that we listed the definition. So for the first definition, this will be the same subject doing activity 1 or verb 1 and verb 2 among other such verbs. So for our first example sentence, we have the line Shuumatsu ni terebi o mitari, game o shitari, tomodachi to issho ni tabetari shimasu. And what this line translates to is, on the weekends, I watch television, I play games, and I eat with my friends. So let's break this sentence down bit by bit. First up, we have Shuumatsu ni, and Shuumatsu means weekend. And the particle ni here is basically just acting as a time marker for weekend. After that, we have terebi o mitari, and terebi is, of course, television. We have the direct object particle o to mark television as the direct object of the verb miru, and here it's translated into its tari form, and we see here that the tari form of miru is simply the ta form of miru plus the character ri. So miru turns into mita when it's in its ta form, then we simply add that character, so that becomes mitari. After that, we have another activity, game o shitari. Game here is going to be video game basically. O is marking video game as the direct object of the verb suru, which is also in its tari form. Shita is the past form of suru, and then we add a ri after that, so shitari. And for the last activity, we have tomodachi to issho ni tabetari, and tomodachi is friend or friends. To is a particle that basically translates to with here. Tabetari is the verb taberu, to eat, in its tari form. Tabeta is the past form of taberu, and then we add the ri after that, so that becomes tabetari. Then after we have used all of the verbs that are going to be conjugated into tari, the grammar construct needs us to end that with the final verb suru, and here here it's going to be translated into its polite form, so shimasu. So altogether, again, the sentence is Shuumatsu ni terebi o mitari, game o shitari, tomodachi to issho ni tabetari shimasu. And that translates to, on the weekends, I watch TV, I play games, and I eat with my friends. So yeah, note the structure of the grammar construct here. Every verb that we explicitly list, such as watching, playing, and eating, those are going to be all conjugated into their tari form. And once we're done listing all of those verbs, then we end the construction with the verb suru, and that can be in whatever conjugation that is appropriate. And in this case, it's in shimasu because we're being polite. And also notice that even if this is a polite sentence or even if it's a casual sentence, the tari form, it just only has one conjugation, tari. So we'll do one more example for the first definition of tari. For our next example, we have the line, Kino kaimono shitari aisu o tabetari shimashita. And what this is saying is just yesterday I went shopping and ate ice cream and did other such things. So let's break this sentence down. First up, we have kino, which is yesterday. We have kaimono shitari, and kaimono is going to be a verbal noun. It means shopping. And of course, because it's a verbal noun, it's going to use suru. And here we do have suru. It's in its tari form, so shitari. We move on to the next activity, and that's aisu o tabetari. Aisu is basically ice cream. We have the direct object marker o to mark ice cream as the object of the verb taberu, and this is again in its tari form because that's what it needs to be. So taberu turns into tabetari. Then we have shimashita, and this is the suru that we need at the end of the grammar construct conjugated into the past polite tense because we're talking about yesterday. So suru turns into shimashita. So altogether, kino kaimono shitari aisu o tabetari shimashita is yesterday I went shopping and ate ice cream and did other such things. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second definition of tari, and that is just among a group, an entity that represents a group. Some of the entities in that entity that is a group were doing this thing, and others were doing this thing, and others were doing this thing, and etc. So for our first example sentence for this, we have Kono campus no gakusei tachi wa benkyou shitari, bukatsudo ni sanka shitari, volunteer shitari suru. And what this sentence translates to is basically, of the students of this campus, some study, some participate in club activities, and some volunteer. So we break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have kono campus, and this is going to be this campus. Then we have no gakusei tachi. It basically just means it's possessive, so the students of this campus, or this campus's students, because gakusei tachi means students. The tachi is the plural indication because gakusei alone could either mean student or students, but when we add the tachi onto it to make gakusei tachi, then this definitely makes it students plural. So here we have confirmed that our subject is a group of people, not just a single person. After that, we have the particle wa to mark them as the topic of the sentence. Then we get into the verbs that we need to list. So benkyou shitari is first. Benkyou is a verb we've used before. It's a verbal noun. It means to study. So we have suru, and that's conjugated into shitari. After that, we have bukatsudo, and this means club activities. After bukatsudo, we have ni sanka shitari, and sanka suru is a verbal noun that means to participate. So we have sanka shitari because the suru turns into shitari as always. And we have the particle ni there to indicate that it's the bukatsudo, the club activities that they're participating in. And for the last verb activity, we have volunteer shitari, and volunteer is just the word volunteer. It turns into a verbal noun here, so we have to use suru again, and that changes into shitari. Then finally, we have just suru in its casual, plain form to end the construction here and to end the sentence as well. So all together, kono campus no gakusei tachi wa benkyou shitari, bukatsudo ni sanka shitari, volunteer shitari suru means the students of this campus, some of them volunteer, some of them study, and some of them participate in club sports or club activities. Okay, for the next example for this definition of the tari form, we have the line Watashi tachi wa soji shitari tabemono o junbi shitari shite imasu. And what this sentence is basically saying is some of us are cleaning and some of us are preparing food. So let's analyze the sentence. For the first word, we have watashi tachi, and watashi of course means me or I. And if we add tachi after it to make it into a plural, it turns into we, or us. After watashi tachi, we have wa to mark us or we as the topic of the sentence. Then we get into the verbs here. First up we have soji shitari. Soji is a verbal noun. It means to clean. So soji suru turns into soji shitari because we're conjugating it into this grammar construct. After that we have tabemono o, and this is food. Tabemono means food, and o is marking it as the direct object of the verb. And the verb we're using here is junbi suru, another verbal noun, and it means to prepare. So junbi suru turns into junbi shitari because of course the grammar construct needs these to be in tari form. And so now we're done listing the verbs that we want to list now explicitly, so we're just going to end it, and we end that with the verb suru. But in this case we're going to change it to shiteimasu because shiteimasu is the conjugation of suru, to do, when we want to say am doing, changing it to am doing to make it a continual activity that is occurring right now. So this means that we are still currently cleaning and we are still currently preparing the food. So again, all together, watashi tachi wa soji shitari tabemono o junbi shitari shiteimasu means some of us are cleaning and some of us are preparing food. Emphasis on the present time action, continual action. Okay, so those are the two more commonly used definitions of the tari form. For the last one, we'll go through one quick example. Again, this is the definition that means an entity is expressing a repetitive change of state. So for our example sentence for this definition, we have the line ame ga futtari yandari shiteimasu. And what this translates to loosely is it has been raining on and off. If we analyze the actual Japanese sentence here, we have first up the word ame, which is rain. We have ga, making rain as the subject of the sentence. We have futtari, and this is the tari form of the verb furu, which means to fall, and this verb is commonly used with rain to just mean that it's raining. Ame ga furu literally means rain is falling, but it's loosely translated to raining basically. After futtari we have another verb that's going to be in its tari form, and that is yandari, and that's going to mean basically stop. Then we finish listing the verbs here because basically those are the only two things that we recognize rain as doing in this scenario. It rains, it falls, and it stops falling, and it falls, and it stops falling. It keeps switching between those states. It doesn't really do anything else. So we end the listing of verbs here, and we finish with the verb suru, but we're going to change that into shiteimasu again like the previous example because it is in the current state of still doing that. The rain is still going back and forth from dropping and not dropping, not falling, falling, blah blah blah, etc. So this is a continual state right here. So we're using shiteimasu to mean is doing this stuff because it's still happening, and yeah. So again, altogether, ame ga futtari yandari shiteimasu, it's kind of literally translated to the rain is falling and stopping over and over. But we're just gonna go with a more simple translation of it is raining on and off, or it has been raining on and off, and that should suffice basically. Basically, the important thing to note here is that the tari form can represent a repetitive change of state. So if you see it being used in a sentence and it doesn't makes sense with the first definition that we listed, which is the way more common one, then you can reach into the recess of your mind and realize that it can also mean this, and maybe that's just what the speaker that you're listening to is trying to say. Okay, so that's the three definitions or three meanings of the tari conjugation. The first one, again, is definitely the most common. The second is a little bit used, not really to be honest, and the third one is pretty rare, but of course all three of them are really good to know. So yeah, that's